Welcome to Now Serving a Site of Therapy, a client's introductory guide into the therapeutic world. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and comment on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. To schedule a therapy appointment, call us at 650-223-5065. For more information on this and other related topics, check out our blog at isotherapy.com, where you can also contact us through our website. I'm your host, Dalton Huckabee, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm grateful you've joined me. When we talk about the activated stressors and the impact on mental health, what are some of like somebody might feel depressed, right? Or hopeless, right? Or someone might feel more anxious, right? And so what are some of the things that people can kind of keep a lookout for? Like when we talk about being able to identify what's coming up for them, right? We can think about, for example, we can talk about somatic symptoms, right? They may not be aware that when they're watching things, videos, like their ears are in their shoulders, for example, and their heart rate is about to pound on their chest, right? So maybe they're tuning into what those somatic symptoms are. I often see that as a window into what might be happening cognitively and effectively, or with their emotions, right? Because the naming what they're feeling in their body can give us insight into what might be coming up for me in this moment in response to this activated stressor.
Yeah.
And so what's been some of your experience around working with clients kind of like in that space?
Yeah. Well, I feel like a big one that comes up is like loss of sleep, right? So just noticing like an impact. And I think that can also be because a lot of times when we're gonna go to sleep, I think a lot of us have the habit of we're scrolling right before we're going to sleep. So that can come up, right? Of like either it can be more like, like I have had more clients tell me like, I feel like I've been having more like nightmares, right? Or like maybe I've some mention like my has been feeling more interrupted, or maybe I'm having a hard time going to sleep. So that to me like tells me, right, like, okay, so it seems like there is some like activation like happening. So that's why I do like a lot of times I do recommend for people to have more of a like we call like sleep hygiene routine, right? Of like, okay,
You
just
took the
keeping
words
in
right out of
mind,
my mouth. Sleep
right?
hygiene. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there something that you were thinking of with that too, Elton?
Nope. I was just gonna say, like, you took the words out of
Yeah.
it, right. Like, kind of,
Yeah.
okay, what are my habits, right,
Yeah.
that I'm engaging in response to these somatic symptoms that I might be feeling too, right? And so,
hmm
like, maybe if we can like look at what some of those habits are that might respond, and is there a way to kind of adjust so that, again, if we want to tend to the central nervous system, right, or the trauma in the central nervous system, that's where kind of some of that healing will go. It's not going to happen from, like you say, from scrolling on the phone, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I think a lot of times I do go over just different like sleep hygiene tips with my clients, right? Whether that's like trying to make your space a little more comforting. Because yeah, I think our space, like ideally we want to feel safe and comfortable, right? Where we're going to sleep. I think something else I talk about is just like also just noticing maybe what content we are digesting before, because like for example, a lot of times I recommend like, okay, let's maybe if we feel like we need some type of sound when we go to sleep, because I'm like that. Sometimes I feel like I still need something in the background. It's like, okay, maybe I'll put like look up some like videos of like rain noises, or for me I like to hear sometimes like there's a YouTube page called like Boring Like History. Sometimes I'll listen to something like that where it feels a little more like neutral, when I'm going to sleep. And for me, I feel like that like helped, and I know some of my clients have like resonated with things like that, because I think sometimes I do share with my clients things that I just as a person I've tried, and I'm like, oh, you know what, I feel like this is kind of helped, and sometimes that like will connect with clients too. So yeah, so I think I'm always open to just exploring, right? Like, okay, let's take a look at like what we were doing before this happened.
Yeah, it really is about like playing with different ideas and see what helps and what doesn't help. Just sometimes just tending to the basics, right? Again, someone might have had a loved one taken from them, right? Or things like
Hmm.
this, right? Or the kid might have been bullied at school, right? How can we, again, feeling so powerless and a lot of
Yeah.
strong emotions coming up around that, right? And so um, sometimes even just kind of like tending to our own basics for needs of feeling secure, right? How is my nutrition, right? How is my, you know, things that sleep, right? Or things like this. What are some things that can provide me some sense of comfort during this super challenging time? And I'm not going to sit here or stand. I'm standing, but I'm not going to stand
Yeah.
here and say, like, I know what it's like for them to be going through that because I don't. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Um, and yet, from this kind of therapeutic lens, there are some things that maybe we can offer that, again, maybe they hadn't like thought about. Oh, yeah, maybe I should make sure that I'm eating more than, maybe I
Hmm.
should just make sure I'm eating,
Yeah.
period, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
So just tending to sometimes just tending to the basics can
Mhm.
can be of some benefit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I totally resonate with that too. It's just like I think that sounds even more like referencing back to that like circle of control, right? Of like taking care of ourselves at least and like our needs. And yeah, and I think it is difficult. It is definitely a challenging time right now. I think even as a provider, right? I think it's hard when it feels sometimes like maybe I don't have the answers on what can make all this right, in this moment. So I think that is where, like you were sharing, right? I at least like talk with clients about like, well, what can we do to make sure we're okay, maybe just in the next 5 minutes, right? Or like just give ourselves like a little like mental break, just for our body, hopefully to like feel a little bit more like calm, relaxed, or like regulated for a moment.
Hmm. Yeah, and because if we don't kind of tend to ourselves in that space, right, then say for example, if one of the things we want to do is engage in like local community, right, or events, or you know in order to, if we want to add, the part of that fight, right, from that we talked about
Mhm.
earlier, right, if we want to engage in this kind of fight aspect, we're going to need to feel rested at some extent, right? We're going to need to be sure that you know we have nutrients in our body in order to do the thing, right, that we want to do. So um just kind of I just kind of wanted to emphasize that, right? That the idea of kind of tending to these basics is to then help us do the things that we want to do.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's also something good too, right, to consider is like, well, maybe whether it's like, okay, I'm gonna work on like taking care of like my needs right now, and then maybe there's also other things that I see like that maybe I want to be a part of, right? Like you said, whether that's like volunteering, local action. Yeah, and I mean, I have clients who are like in like elementary or middle school that have still like gone to maybe some like protests or things like that, and like and they've even shared with me like how that's like made them feel good, right, to be like a part of that. So yeah, so I think just thinking about how this is something too, like just maybe like all ages, right, might be like having like some stress with this like current environment and might be processing it like differently too.
Yeah, so we kind of think about like moving from this place of isolation to community involvement, right? That could be, an avenue that people can take to help them feel safe, for example, right? This is just coming up with examples. And again, I'm sure that we might be missing a whole bunch of other factors that might come into influence this super important conversation that we're having, right? We might just be scratching the surface. Oftentimes we are in a lot of these kind of
Yeah.
discussions that we have on the podcast, right? We're just kind of very
Yeah.
scratching the surfaces. And so, but what we try to do is offer a window of insight and support with whatever people are going through.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's like important. So I think just even to have the conversations, right? I think is like sometimes just a step in of itself, right? That we're like opening
Yeah,
up.
sometimes it's having conversations, right? Like you said, if we're tending to the,
Hmm.
if we tend to engage in isolation tendencies, right? Again,
Hmm.
maybe actually talking to someone where we can imagine, right, how that sense of mistrust might even come up for people, right? Around
Yes.
like who can I trust, right? So helping them identify who are some people that you can trust, that you can talk about these things with, even if it's hard to put into words, right, of what they might be experiencing, still having a place to go to be able to talk about it. Or sometimes if they want to journal things down, right? Again,
Hmm.
what's happening is that, again, because if these things are living inside of us, we want to think of ways to externalize what might be going on, right? Talking about it and processing with a friend or a family member or a therapist, right? For example, or journaling, right? Or even sometimes when we talk about getting grounded and in our bodies, right? Like, what are some things that people enjoy doing that help to, like, hike in nature, for example, or whatever it is, right? And just to know that we can allow ourselves to move into this space to kind of like take care of ourselves. So again, that we can feel prepared to kind of continue the fight, if you will.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think definitely yeah, I think therapy in of itself can be a form of I know we talk about avoidance is very common, right? And that can be PTSD related or like a lot of other like different like for example, like with anxiety, right? That can also come up as well. So yeah, so I think just talking about things like you said can be a form of like exposure, right? Or kind of like breaking the pattern for ourselves. So yeah, I think it's like it's always good. I mean, I know like myself even as a therapist, like I've had my own like therapy experiences, as well. And I think it helps sometimes just to like connect. And sometimes it also encourages you maybe to connect to different forms of support in your personal life, right? As well.
Hmm. Would it be okay to ask, like, what are
Hmm.
some of the things that you found beneficial? Because again, when we talk about clients, like, we are clients too, right? I
Yeah.
say that all the time.
Hmm.
And so what are some things that you have found that might kind of worked for you going through your own process as it relates to kind of what we're talking about today?
Yeah. Well, I think in general, something that like I worked even like in my own personal therapy is like they talk about living by your values, and I think that like resonates and I think is like maybe even relevant to like, the conversations we've been having today is like just identifying, okay, what do I feel like is important to me and what are ways that I can meet that, kind of like show up for myself in those ways, like in my day-to-day life. And like, I mean, of course, for me, I chose this career because it's my passion, and I love working with clients. And I think, in some aspect, even being there and like talking with them during this current like political climate, just myself, I think also as a Latina, and I know a lot of our like community has been, getting some hate during this time. I think in some aspects like that, like I feel like I am living to that value, right? Of like just trying to connect with my community, like trying to like lower the mental health stigma. And a lot of my clients are Spanish speakers, which is like amazing, right? Just to even be able to like have that space with them too. And then in terms of just like personal values, just like self care, I think I talk with my clients about it, but it's something like I'm also actively trying to incorporate in my own life, right? So for me, it's been like the gym, right? Like that's I know it sounds cheesy, and I know I always tell my clients like, oh, like just moving your body, but it really does help. So I think things like that are also like, have helped me and something I actively worked on in my personal journey and something that I think relates to a lot of my clients now too.
Yeah, and why does the exercise help? Right, because it releases endorphins, right?
Hmm.
And so,
Yes.
yeah, and so kind of these, feeling feel good, right? Feel good endorphins, things that might even like help us be able to sleep better too, right? So it's the
Mhm.
endorphins that are released in order to impact our mood and sleep patterns, to help us regulate our mood and sleep patterns, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think even something that I like show my clients sometimes is just like, and and people can also look this up, but if you actually look up, they have infographics of what the emotions look like in the body. A lot of our emotions kind of live in this like chest area. So it's like, I like, with deep breathing, like I think that like helps. But I think when you're working out, you're kind of having to breathe, right? So you're kind of naturally
Yeah, yeah.
you're like,
You're
like,
not
oh.
gonna last long.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think things like that kind of help where it's kind of like, okay, like I really am releasing something as I'm like working out.
Yeah, you have to get in your body, right? Yeah, exactly. And a
Hmm.
lot of it is that, yeah, where can I put this energy, right?
Hmm.
And whether that be gardening or working out or hiking or whatever it is, right? Um, and and to your point, again, I can't help but keep on circling back to that somatic symptoms piece, right? Like we say,
Hmm.
if a lot of things are feeling in the chest, again, that can be a window to, oh, when I feel my chest, this feeling, whatever the sensation is in my chest, then I can equate that to, oh, this, I may be feeling unsafe, for example, right? And
Yes.
so being able to tune into that, and sometimes, like you said, if it's if if it's the manufactured emotion, right, then it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm actually safe right now.
Yes.
But it's about
Exactly.
that identifying it and tending to it. That's
Yes.
part of the healing process.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's as you said, I think tapping into our bodies, a lot of times our body does tell us what we need in that moment. Like for example, right, when we're crying, sometimes I talk to clients about like I said, that there's that infographic. I recommend people look it up. But it shows like there's a lot of activation when we're crying like in our throat, right? And like our chest. And sometimes it can even like hurt when we're kind of stopping ourselves from crying. So we're kind of going against what our body like naturally wants to do instead of like allowing ourselves that release, right? Too.
Exactly. Yeah. And what I'm always kind of emphasizing is that if we can get into this place of curiosity, right? Like you said earlier, right? Some of the symptoms might be to avoid those somatic symptoms, right? Or maybe people are engaging in what we would call maladaptive behaviors, right? To try to ignore them. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
substance and alcohol use come to mind, right? Or gambling or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
And so just to try to escape, right? Those tendencies to want to escape is is simply an indicator that, hey, I'm tired of living with this pain or this sadness or whatever that strong emotion is, right? And not having a way to be able to process that or express it or get support around it. And so we might find ourselves engaging in these other behaviors. So is it possible to then identify some more alternative ways, right? Some more,
Yes.
more beneficial ways for ourselves, right?
Hmm.
That would have a greater impact on our mental health in a
Yeah.
positive way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think a lot of times the intention is to cope, right? And maybe we sometimes can look for something that gives us that like immediate effect, right? Like for example, with alcohol, it's like, okay, maybe I like feeling all calm in this moment. But maybe there's like other ways, right, that we can achieve that. Um
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
not to
I
say
think
that
that's
that's
good.
completely bad at all, right? But
Yeah.
again,
Mhm.
it's just to the point where it starts to become a concern. That's where we want to start looking at it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I think it's all about just having balance, right? And I say that to my clients too. Sometimes
exactly.
like it's like, yeah, like it's okay. Like we can have a wine and paint night. Like that's okay. Yeah. So yeah. So not saying we have to completely get rid of these things, but maybe there's other things we're wanting to incorporate more.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because it is about practicing new ways of dealing with, especially when it comes to, stressors around trauma, right? And PTSD, right? If trying to find new ways of responding to that and supporting ourselves. Like you said, if the somatic symptoms are they're coming up for a reason, and if we can find out what they need, right? Maybe it's like, oh, I need just someone to listen, right? But being able to have some people will often ask me, tell this to clients all the time. People ask me, oh, do you talk to yourself? And I say, yeah, and I answer myself too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like trying to
Yeah.
like tune in to like what do we need and hearing what comes back. And like you said, if those activated parts are noticing that we are tending to them and that we are supporting them and that we are listening to them and we are, responding to that, what then they're likely to kind of calm down a little bit. And then that can help us be able to kind of like, again, strive for this sense of safety or emotional regulation when those can be just blown up in the face of, the political climate or, times when we're feeling unsafe.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think finding like safety within like ourselves and our body, I think is something important, right? And I think, like I said, also it goes back just to that like circle of control of like, okay, how can I find a sense of power and control maybe within myself?
Mhm. And I love when you go into that aspect of personal values too. What a lot
Mhm,
of these things that you'll notice that when we're talking about is like things that yes, you have that community support, right? And talking about things, absolutely. But a lot of these things is how can we tend to ourselves, right? This aspect of like, you know, tending to ourselves, um, that that can it's a part, right? It's a part. It can be a part of the healing process. So like you said, no easy overnight solution to any of this, right? And
mhm,
sometimes it takes trying a few different things, um and I like the aspect of turning to the personal values because that can inform our behavior. And if we're, especially if we're, like you said, if we're working with clients, like we model that, right? So we basically are practicing what we're preaching in a way.
mhm.
As far as, and again, everybody's values are going to be different. And, but on identifying those and honoring those and enacting those is an expression and representation of our authentic selves.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think what you said, right, of like a lot of times this isn't going to be an overnight thing that's going to happen, right, or change. But yeah, I think something that even when I was talking about the values, there's this book called like Atomic Habits. At least I watched a YouTube video. I didn't like read the whole book, but there were parts that like I think resonated with that, where it says like, every time that you choose to make a decision with your ideal version in mind, maybe, or the person, or the person you want to become, you're kind of like casting a vote, right, for that. So it's like maybe even if you're not seeing that immediate result in that moment, like you already casted that vote for like the future, and like in the future you will see like hopefully that outcome that you're like wanting.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate your time and your expertise and your insights, right, and your feedback into this, important discussion. Definitely, um, in today's time, right? Uh, um, Even it's really worldwide. You know what I mean? Like there's
Hmm.
just a lot of heavy stuff going on worldwide. And so even if you know, don't think that you're necessarily impacting your immediate political climate, like there's stuff happening all over the world, that a lot of injustices and oppressions, right? And things like this. And even if we're not personally affected, we may know someone who is. And so,
Hmm.
and so being able to be that source of support for other people too.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I agree.
All right. Well, thanks again for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, who knows? Maybe I always say it, right? Maybe we'll have you back on again if there's another topic that resonates.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Dalton.
Thanks for tuning in this week. Be sure to listen to our next episode as we explore various aspects of how to show up for ourselves and others by tending to our own mental and emotional well being.